But I mentioned Anderson and Gallows signing with Impact, and this is our top story this week. They dropped their much anticipated Talkin' Shop podcast on YouTube, which they brought Ryan Satin in to host. He led the interview with the two of them. Very entertaining, very funny, but also very informative interview. And midway through, they brought in their friend Rocky Romero from New Japan Pro Wrestling, so Rocky got in on half the interview as well. And they talked about a ton of stuff, from when they decided that they had to get the hell out of WWE, to why they ended up re-signing, how close they truly came to going to AEW, and what those creative plans entailed. The plane incident in Saudi Arabia, their release from WWE in April, and their heat with Paul Heyman that AJ Styles recently touched on. Styles had said that he was going to let Anderson and Gallows kind of tell the story, and they did. And it was great, too, because Gallows was drinking red wine the entire time out of this mug. So, like, as the interview went on, he got more and more, like, loose lips, right? They got more and more laid back and more open, I felt like, in his thoughts. And he was not opposed to burying people, namely Paul Heyman. You know, it's one of the things that I love about those Kevin Nash shoots. I feel like Kevin Nash has red wine running through his bloodstream. So, you know, because they used to joke about, like, Paul Bear and stuff. I think I heard somebody on TV once use this insult. You know, because Paul Bear used to be very fat. And so it was common on TV, they would tell fat jokes about Paul Bear. I think I was Lawler, who said this once, but said, like, Paul Bear is so fat, he's got ragu running through his bloodstream or something. When I think of Kevin Nash, he's got red wine running through his bloodstream. I feel like he's always got that red wine. So when he's drinking during some of his shoot interviews, it's always very entertaining. Always very entertaining. And as you know what they say, right? A drunk man's words are a sober man's thoughts. So I felt like that maybe made things a little more fun as they went on. So they signed a 3-year deal with WWE in 2016 and came in with AJ Styles, a lot of fanfare around their big debut. They all defected over from New Japan, and they had their run as the Club. You know, AJ came in first, Anderson and Gallows came, I think, about a month and a half or 2 months later. And they were the Club. And Anderson says that when they did that match on SmackDown later in the year, it was in October, probably like a Halloween episode. It was the match where they had some kind of like Halloween-themed match, and he ended up with a pumpkin on his head, and then he got put through a table. That was the first time where they're in the car, they're driving to the next town or whatever, and he just turns to Gallows and says, "What the hell did we just do? Like, what have we done?" And they were already thinking, in October of 2016, they were already eyeing September of 2019 when their contracts were up. They got buyer's remorse real early in that relationship. So I didn't know that that's how far back their buyer's remorse went on those contracts that they signed. But it was only about 7 months in, and they were already looking for the exit. Now you fast forward to January of 2019. All Elite Wrestling is born. They have that big press conference to announce the formation of the company and who all the EVPs are. And Chris Jericho was there. It was all this fanfare. Remember that big outdoor press conference? But the month before, in December, Anderson had heard, he had heard about what the Bucks were doing, and AEW had not been formally announced yet, but he knew something was going on there, and he was friendly with the Bucks. He was friendly with them, I assume, from his time in New Japan. And so he was texting them. And when WWE was in California for a house show, he and Gallows met up with the Bucks. They met at in the middle of a food court in a mall. So they're sitting there in the food court in the mall talking for like an hour or 2 hours, whatever it was. And they're getting the full pitch on what's going to happen. Here's our plans. And they got the full pitch for what AEW is going to be. But they still weren't sure. They were not convinced. I mean, yeah, these guys are our friends. We trust them. We believe in them. But they were not sure that it was really going to happen. Because let's be honest here. I mean, how many times have we heard a new company is starting up and they put a press release out? Revolutionary. This is going to change the business. And we're going to get a big TV deal. We can't tell you where. The negotiations are still going on, but we're going to get a big TV deal and we're going to, it's going to change the business. How many times have we heard this? We've heard this a lot over the years. And rarely does anything ever happen, so these guys had good reason to be skeptical. But, things were serious enough. They eventually even flew into Winnipeg. They had a meeting with Kenny Omega, so they got to sit down with Kenny, and they were talking to Kenny. Fast forward to the summer of last year. Dynamite has already been announced. They put the release out in May, I think. TNT picked it up. Dynamite, I don't think it had a name at that point, but we knew that AEW was going to have a TV show soon on TNT. So that was already a done deal. And Anderson gets a text from Matt Jackson laying out, here are what our plans are going to be for your big debut. So when we have the premiere of Dynamite, I don't remember what the main event was. I guess it involved the Bucks and Kenny. I don't remember. But at the end of the night, at the end of the main event, you guys are going to come out. You're going to make your big debut. First episode of Dynamite. You guys are going to come out. You're going to too sweet us in the middle of the ring. And then you're going to just beat the holy hell out of us. And leave everybody laying. Leave the elite laying in the ring. And as Anderson was telling this story, you could tell how badly he regrets that they did not do that. It still irks him to this day. And there was heat on the AEW side, and there still is with some people apparently who are pretty high up in that company. They have since, now he claims they've since made amends with the Bucks, and they're cool now. But for a while there, they weren't. They said for a good 6 months, leading up to the decision they made to re-sign with WWE, they gave Matt Jackson and the Young Bucks every indication that they were gone and they were coming into AEW. They would tell them, God, dude, we want out. We can't wait. We're just counting down the days. We want out. We're coming in. We're coming in. No matter what. No matter what, he told them, we're coming in. And Anderson says that there were hard feelings on the AEW side because he thinks what happens is that the Bucks went. They were convinced that these guys were coming in. And they went and they told people, I assume Tony Khan was one of those people, hey, we got them. We got them. They're coming in. Let's come up with plans. This is going to be great. And then when they didn't come, it made them look like they couldn't close the deal. It made them look bad. Gallows said that they have a friend who works for AEW in a pretty high up, what he called power position. I think he said he's also a wrestler, so that kind of limits it to who it could be. You can use your imagination on that. And he heard from that person who basically said, what the fuck, guys? Like, what the hell? And he still thinks that person is still offended by what happened. And his answer to that person, if that person ever hears the interview he says or reads the transcript of what we're saying here, is that, look, it was nothing personal. It was just a business decision that we made. He says they were looking at not only a ton of money, but a 5-year deal with WWE as opposed to a 2-year deal for less money. I mean, still very good money, but a 2-year deal for less money with AEW. Should they have taken the smaller offer and bet on themselves and been something really cool again like they were in New Japan? Gallows said, fuck yeah. They've got egg dripping down their faces even still for the decision that they made. But he feels a lot of people in that same position would look at their wife or they would look at their kids, and it would be an easy decision to make to just take the money and run. Just take the WWE money, keep your mouth shut, go to work. And, when the check comes in, cash the check. Or if you get direct deposit, enjoy it. I think it's very telling that these two ended up with Impact and not with AEW. Here's what I think. I think FTR basically took the spot that these guys would have had if they would have come in earlier. Not that AEW wouldn't have taken FTR necessarily because they really want to do that match with the Bucks and FTR. But, if you kind of look at it as, okay, we've got a quota here of ex-WWE acts or ex-WWE teams. I just feel like FTR has that spot. They have the spot that these guys could have had. I think that there was, a spot for that one team to come over from WWE, and FTR wound up with that spot. That plus the lingering bad blood from people, probably still in that company, there was no spot for them in AEW. They were not going to jump at the chance to sign these guys when these guys burned them last year. I 100% believe that they wanted to go to AEW, but the offer wasn't there this time. So they had to settle for Impact. Impact was probably their second choice. Look, they fucked over their friends. That's what they did. Anderson admits it. He said it exactly that way. We fucked over our friends. We fucked over our friends to stay at a place that they admitted to them made them absolutely miserable. It's like if I had a friend who told me for 6 months, dude, I'm coming in, brother. Like, I can't wait, dude. And I went and I made these big plans for him. And I told my boss, we got him. And then they didn't come in. I would be pissed too. And you know what? I would think twice before doing business with them. I could be friends with them, but I would have to think twice before I did business with these people. I can't fault the Young Bucks for that. I'm not going to shit on the Young Bucks for that. These two guys, they took a gamble, and it didn't pay off. If you are that unhappy, look, you dance with the devil, sometimes you get the horns. And that's exactly what happened to these two guys. I don't really have any sympathy for them. You know, they made good money, I guess, for the time their contract lasted, and they made it very clear. They're all about the money. Great, okay, it's the wrestling business. You want to make money. But it didn't work out for them in the end, now did it? They have nobody to blame for that but themselves. They talked about the incident in Saudi Arabia. This was very interesting. I didn't think they'd touch on this. This was the incident that took place after the Crown Jewel show last November, the one where the talent did not make it back to the States in time for SmackDown, and we got that great NXT edition of SmackDown. One of the best SmackDowns in years. We had Daniel Bryan against Adam Cole in the main event for the NXT Championship. That was the Crown Jewel show where Brock Lesnar beat Cain Velasquez in 2 minutes. We had Team Hogan against Team Flair. And The Fiend. They tried to fix the mistake they made at Hell in a Cell, and The Fiend won the Universal Championship from Seth Rollins. Much of the crew did not make it back. Did not make it out, even, of Saudi Arabia because of what WWE, to this day, claims was a mechanical issue with the plane. And they went to painstaking measures to explain, and just nothing to see here. It was just a mechanical issue. That's it. Don't believe the rumors. But there were plenty of other stories about there being some kind of a blow-up with WWE and the Saudi government over something that may have led to the Saudis intentionally grounding that plane just to fuck with them. Just to screw with WWE. And there is still no concrete proof of anything. We may never have proof. But this, to me, is the clearest indication yet that something did happen, that they did not want to get out because they still have years left on their deal with the Saudi government. They don't want to make them look bad. They don't want to piss them off. They wouldn't want that story to get out if there was a blow up and something did happen. But here's why I'm convinced something did happen. Karl Anderson tells a story. He says they had a 1 a.m. charter flight out of Saudi Arabia when the show was over. They get there 2 hours early. So they're waiting. They're waiting around 2 hours early to get on the plane. They see Vince McMahon and a few other people kind of pass by them and wave, and Vince gets on his own separate plane, of course, and he flies out of there. So Vince is gone. Everyone else is standing around waiting. They've been up all day. They've got a long flight back. A lot of them are going right to SmackDown. They just want to get on the damn plane and probably just go to sleep. Now it's 1 a.m., nothing's happening. Now it's 2 a.m., nothing's happening. They're still on the tarmac. They're not even on the plane. They're just standing around. Now it's 3 a.m., now it's 4 a.m., and nobody is telling them anything. Nobody is communicating anything to them about why is there a delay, what's going on. But what they do see are some guys talking. I guess some of the Saudis are talking, and it seems kind of heated. And then they see John Laurinaitis and Mark Carrano from Talent Relations, and they're talking to people, and it's, again, these heated conversations are going on. And then they hear, Gallows says, I guess they got a text message from a friend of theirs who works in production for WWE and has no reason to bullshit them on this. This is not one of the boys. This is somebody, I don't know if he's a camera operator or who he is, but he works in production for the company. Obviously, he must have worked on the show that night, whatever this person's job is. And he gets a text message from this person who says that during the show, they could hear in the headsets Vince McMahon, and this was early on in the show, they could hear Vince McMahon yelling and telling people, maybe Kevin Dunn, whoever it would have been, to cut the feed. Now, that's not the feed for their network, WWE Network. That aired perfectly fine and live. But the show was airing locally on a certain channel in Saudi Arabia, and they could hear Vince McMahon basically saying, cut the feed. Now, the show was advertised in Saudi Arabia to be airing live. So let's say the show was going to air locally there at 7 o'clock. What we know is that the show did not air live at its scheduled time at 7 o'clock. It was an hour or two before the show then, on a delay, finally began airing. And they've never explained the reason for that delay. The belief was that Vince McMahon had an argument with the Saudi officials, probably over money that they were still owed, because the Saudis still owed them money from the previous shows. I don't know how much, but the figure that has been thrown around, which, I mean, it's a pretty big figure, is somewhere in the range of $500 million. But whatever the figure was that they were still owed, Vince McMahon wanted to be paid, and when he wasn't, he demanded that the feed be cut. I guess until the situation was resolved. And then, all of a sudden, voila, the feed was back. So this, and again, there is no concrete evidence of what happened, but I am convinced now that that's exactly what happened here. Now it all makes sense, because they kept those guys waiting around for so long. They got them on the plane eventually, then they sat there for even longer, they didn't move. Everyone on the plane is starting to freak out a little bit and texting each other. All the boys are texting each other, what the fuck? You know, what's going on here? Anderson leaned over to Michael Hayes. I love how Vince McMahon left Michael Hayes behind. He leans over to Michael Hayes, and he says to Hayes, and he was only maybe like partly joking. He goes, are we in like a hostage type situation here? And Michael Hayes just looks at him and goes, I don't know. That's his answer, which is very encouraging when you look to what basically one of your bosses and you ask, are we in a hostage type of situation here? And his response is, I don't know. I have no idea. So then eventually they got everybody off the plane. And they got them all on buses, and they were driving around trying to find a hotel with enough rooms available for all of them. Just to put them in. So they found one. I guess everybody took a quick nap. And they didn't get them back on the plane to go home for another 24 hours or so. They said they never felt unsafe. It wasn't like people putting guns to their heads or anything like that, but they did feel very uncomfortable. You're in this foreign country. Of all places, you're in Saudi Arabia, which, you know, you hear stories about the government there and stuff like that. You're in this foreign country. Your boss has already left. He's gone. He went home. You know, if Vince knew what was going on, would he have stayed? I'd like to think he would have. But boy, he got out of there real quick. He certainly didn't have any issues getting out of there. So they said, we never really felt unsafe, but we felt very uncomfortable. And, you know, they did see these heated conversations going on, and that's when they started to get a little bit worried. And Anderson even texted his wife. Karl Anderson texted his wife and told her, tell the kids I love them. Now, he didn't really think that their lives were in danger, but I guess he felt uncomfortable enough that he texted that to his wife. I did laugh. I laughed my ass off when they said that they did manage to get a flight out that night with a handful of main eventers to try to get them to SmackDown in time, which they ended up not making it. But they said when they saw them shuffling some of the main event guys, like scrambling to get these, like this small group of people onto a separate flight, and that flight left, and that flight took off and got out of there. Meanwhile, everybody else is left standing around stranded. They thought, oh great, they're getting the top guys out of here so they can kill all of us. And Gallows just goes, shit, they're gonna kill the mid-carders. They're getting all the headliners out of here, and they're just gonna kill the mid-carders. Just the way he said it, I fucking died when he said that. But then they looked around and they realized that, you know, they saw Cain Velasquez and they saw AJ Styles, and then they saw Randy Orton. And once they saw Randy Orton, they knew they were okay. Once they saw Randy, they said, we're good. We don't got anything to worry about. They wouldn't leave Randy behind. If Randy had left, then we would have real problems here. But if Randy Orton is still here, then we're probably okay. But yeah, look, if the production people heard Vince McMahon yelling, cut the feed, or yelling things in the headset, then obviously something was going on here. Obviously, they wouldn't want that to get out because they've got years left on this relationship. Many, 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 many millions of dollars are at stake. They don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to make them look bad. They don't want to piss off their partners. So, of course, they would do everything in their power to make sure that story was squashed. But I thought that was very, very telling. Very telling. And very ridiculous to not explain to people what the hell was going on. You know, Michael Hay is supposed to be some real higher up guy in the company, and his answer is, well, I don't know. I don't know. What kind of answer is that? So, about a year before their WWE deals were up, Mark Carrano comes to them. These guys were just hoping. They knew they wanted out, right? They're like, all right, we got a year. We're a little over a year. Let's just keep our heads down, stay quiet, right? Show up to work, do what we got to do, and when the time is up for us, we'll leave and we'll get the hell out of here. So about a year before, Mark Carrano says to them, hey, we got to talk about signing new deals. And they're like, shit. And so they were hoping it would just be forgotten about, right? And just quietly slip away. They're like, well, they're not doing anything with us anyway, so maybe they just won't bring it up. But by that point, there had already been murmurs about AEW. Right? It didn't have a name yet, but the stories were out there about Cody and the Bucks and Kenny Omega possibly starting their own company. WWE has to know that these guys are friendly with those guys. Getting Jericho involved was probably already circulating at that point. So WWE wanted to lock these guys down early. Triple H was the one who kept texting them every other day. He's like the crazy ex. He wouldn't stop. Texting them every other day, trying to get them to sign new deals. He was on their asses every single week. And then the three of them team up at a WWE live event in Japan. Triple H just so happens to be added to the show as a special attraction. And who is Triple H teaming with? Well, by God, it's the Good Brothers and AJ Styles. And there's that picture of them all doing the Too Sweet sign right in the ring together. Now, why do you think Triple H would add himself or would be added to team with the Good Brothers at a time when they're being courted to sign new contracts? I mean, come on. Could you be any less transparent about what you're trying to do here? So they go out there in Japan, they have the match, they come back, they take a shower, they come out of the shower, and Triple H pulls him aside and he's just flat out asks him, he goes, what is it going to take? Tell me. What is it going to take to get you guys to re-sign? And so he throws a number at them that just blew them away. And it was a high enough number for a lot of years, and they just felt like they couldn't turn it down. It was just an offer that they felt they couldn't turn down. And it was maybe a week or two later that the story broke that they had re-signed new deals with WWE. It wasn't even official yet, but the story was, and I think it might have been Ryan Satin actually who broke the story, that it was for 5 years each. The figure, and this was not in the story, but the figure that was bandied about in a lot of places and on a lot of websites was in the range of $750,000 a year each. I mean, even if it was $500,000 a year each, that's a lot of money. $750,000 a year for each member of the Good Brothers for 5 years apiece. I mean, if that doesn't tell you that WWE was just spending money at that point just to hoard talent and keep them from going to AEW, then you've got your head buried in the sand. I don't know what to tell you. You are hopeless. If you can't see that, you are hopeless. And all due respect to someone like Karl Anderson, you know, Gallows is very entertaining. I don't think Gallows is a great wrestler, but he's very entertaining. He's an entertaining guy. But look, if there's no AEW, there ain't no chance. I'll sing the Vince McMahon song. There ain't no chance in hell that Luke Gallows is getting a 5-year contract for $750,000 a year. There is no way that Karl Anderson is getting a 5-year contract for $750,000 a year. That's almost $4 million for each one of them. There is no way in hell that happens without there being some kind of AEW effect. 0% chance. And here's the kicker. When Triple H was backstage with them in Japan, negotiating and trying to get them to sign, and they finally agreed, I mean, right there in Japan, they didn't even wait. They shook hands. They had a handshake agreement. They already... And again, like, I think about these things with these wrestlers, and I'm like, my God, like, how dumb are some of these people? Like, any kind of big deal like that. I understand the pressure involved, I guess, right? But these guys were, I mean, prime position. They had all the leverage in the world. It wasn't like WWE was going to suddenly pull the offer if you said to them, well, boy, you know, give us a day. Let us think about it. Let us talk to our families. Like, they clearly wanted these guys and wanted to stop them from going somewhere else. So you wait until you get home, you talk to your family, you talk to a lawyer, you talk to people, and you think about something like this. Nope, they agreed on the spot. They agreed on the spot, and they shook hands, and that was the end of it. Unbelievable. So, but one of the things Triple H said, to try to convince Karl Anderson to sign, he looked him dead in the eye, and he said, I look at you, and I see your kids. Because Anderson has like 6 kids. He goes, I see your kids. And what if AEW doesn't last? He goes, I promise you, WWE will always be here. That was his hard sell. Think about your kids. AEW is unproven, which they were, unproven. But we, here in WWE, we're always going to be here for you. Yes, WWE will always be here until they have no use for you anymore. Remember what I said when they got cut? Remember the words that I spoke when these guys first got cut. When you sign one of these big 5-year, they love signing people to 5-year contracts. When you sign a long-term deal, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is, with WWE, you don't have job security with that company. I think people equate like a big contract, a big long contract with job security. You hear about this in sports all the time. A lot of baseball players, they'll hold out for more years. You know, they don't want to sign a 2-year contract or a 3-year contract. They want to know that they're secure. They're going to move their family to a city. They're going to make that their home. They don't want to have to just up and leave and go. I mean, they could always be traded, but they want years. And some of these teams are dumb enough to dole out these stupid contracts for like 5 years, 6 years, 8 years for a player who may not even be in his prime anymore. And you just look at that and you're like, why would you give somebody who's probably going to just, you know, age out in the next 3 years? Why would you give him a 5 or 6 year contract? And so many teams get stuck with players that they just can't do anything with anymore. I mean, good for the players, right? I have no sympathy for the ball clubs. I mean, fuck them. But, you know, I kind of look at it like that. It's a situation where you look at that and equate that to job security. And with WWE, you can't do that because there is no such thing as job security. You know, and it's like you are stuck for those 5 years as an independent contractor, which is the other farce of this whole thing. You're stuck. You can't work anywhere else. Independent my ass. But WWE, they have the power to terminate you anytime they want. Anytime they want. It's not like they're stuck having to pay you the remainder of your contract. So much for that job security. You know, Maria Kanellis, I saw, tweeted out the quote, "Think about your family," and then she tagged, you know, at WWE in the tweet. I assume that means that they fed that same line to her and Mike Kanellis as well. I'm sure they've used that line on a lot of people before. Think about your family. Think about your kids. WWE, it's the biggest game in town. We're always going to be here. Yeah, okay, they're always going to be there, but they're not necessarily going to want you to work there. You can wave. You could drive past Titan Tower in Stanford and wave. That doesn't mean that they're going to want to keep you under contract or re-sign you to a new contract. So Anderson said a week after they agreed to their new deals, they were scripted to job to Ricochet on Raw. And they thought, well, we at least thought that we would have a few months before they start, jobbing us out and trying to bury us. And he reached out to Triple H with his concerns, and Triple H told him to take it up with Paul Heyman, who had just been installed recently as the new executive director of Monday Night Raw. They were well aware of Heyman's reputation as one of the biggest bullshitters in the history of the business, but they were kind of hoping that with us, hopefully that won't be the case. Hopefully he'll be a straight shooter. He'll just, be honest with us and tell it to us like it is, and we can have a great relationship. And Heyman told them, he goes, look, we already have plans to put the tag team titles on you. Don't worry. We're going to put the titles on you soon. And Gallows claims that Heyman told him, if I ever lie to you, I want you to go on social media and I want you to bury the shit out of me. Which, of course, now Luke Gallows is more than happy to go out and bury Paul Heyman. But that's what he claims Heyman said to him. I won't ever lie to you. If I ever lie to you, you just bury my ass. So they talked about how upset AJ Styles was when it became very clear that his big match with The Undertaker at WrestleMania was not going to happen at Raymond James Stadium because of the pandemic. No big stadium show. It was probably going to be at the Performance Center, and they said AJ was very upset. I'm sure everybody. I'm sure Drew McIntyre was very upset. He got deprived of his big WrestleMania moment. You only get one of those. Drew McIntyre could go win title number 2, title number 3 at WrestleMania, next year, 2 years from now, but nothing can ever really replicate that first big win. And it happened in an empty building. This is before they were even having the NXT stand-ins in the crowd. It was an empty frickin' building. So I felt bad for someone like him. So yeah, I'm sure AJ was pretty pissed about that. But then they did the Boneyard match. Anderson and Gallows were part of that, and it came off better than they ever could have imagined. And they got text messages from Triple H and Michael Hayes. Oh, thank you so much. Guys, this came off so great. This was fantastic. Thank you. And they didn't think for a second a few weeks later when they heard that there were some people who were on the chopping block. Because they had just signed those new deals only a few months earlier. And they were also just involved in one of the main events of WrestleMania. And they just got text messages from their bosses thanking them and telling them what a fantastic job they thought they all did. So, of course, you would think, well, my job is safe. My job is not in jeopardy. I feel bad for my colleagues and my friends, but I don't think we have anything to be worried about. But looking back, they say they probably should have suspected something when they were booked to be stacked on top of each other 1 week on Raw and pinned by Drew McIntyre. This was in the build-up to WrestleMania. But Paul Heyman, assured them, he said, it's not going to hurt you in the long run. Don't worry about it. It's not going to hurt you in the long run. They said in WWE, they have an internal system that filters messages out to the talent. Apparently Vince McMahon sent a video out on WhatsApp, which just, I don't know why, that just makes me laugh. I've heard stories about Vince McMahon, how much he loves texting. And apparently, he texts people with, capital letters, he's like the screaming grandpa. But, Undertaker, even, in his documentary, talked about getting text messages from Vince. He's, cussing all the time. When Undertaker told him, okay, I'm in. I'm in for WrestleMania this year. Vince McMahon was like, fuck yeah. I can just... And CM Punk would tell stories about getting text messages from Vince McMahon at, 3 o'clock in the morning. But I guess Vince McMahon recorded a very brief video that went out on WhatsApp to all of the talent on, I think it was Black Wednesday, right? It was a Wednesday when all the cuts were first announced back in April. Letting everybody know that unfortunately, because of the pandemic, we're going to have to be cutting costs and there's going to be talent releases throughout the day. So you may be getting a message from us. It's sad, but this is what has to happen. And then throughout the day, Anderson and Gallows, they see the list, they see all of these names being added to the list, Hawkins and Ryder and, No Way Jose and Aiden English and all of these different people. And they feel bad for them. But then Karl Anderson gets a call from Mark Carrano, giving him the bad news. And he was furious. He just wanted him off the phone. Yeah, he understands that Carrano is the hatchet guy. I mean, Mark Carrano is in the same spot that Jim Ross used to be in, J.J. Dillon used to be in, Johnny Ace used to be in. It is the worst position in the world to be in because you are paid to be the bad guy. Vince McMahon is not the one who's going to go deliver the bad news. It's you. Your responsibility is to go up to the talent or call them on the phone and give them the bad news. And so they get blamed. They're the hatchet man. It is a thankless, shitty job. And so Carrano's like, I'm really sorry about this. And I don't think he blamed Carrano, but he was so angry. He just was like, okay. He just wanted him off the phone. And then Carrano said, well, I got to call your partner now. So he called Luke Gallows, and Gallows also, he couldn't believe it. They were stunned that they were on the list. When AJ found out, AJ Styles was livid when he heard that he hit the roof when he heard the news. And so he started asking around. What the hell happened here? And he was told by somebody, whoever it was, backstage, that Paul Heyman was the one behind it. So AJ went to Heyman. And he said to him, well, you were the one responsible for this? Did you put their names on the list? And Heyman denied it. He said, it wasn't me. I didn't do it. It's not my fault. AJ went to Vince McMahon. And that's when Vince McMahon confirmed what that first person had told AJ, which is that it was Heyman. And Vince claimed, look, they weren't on my list. So Vince McMahon had his own list. And he claims that Anderson and Gallows were not on his list of names to be let go. It was all a Heyman decision. So he shifted the blame completely onto Paul Heyman. And that was when AJ said he couldn't work with Heyman, and they traded him back to SmackDown to separate him, keep him away from Heyman. Of course, in the end, it didn't matter because it was only like a week later, 2 weeks later maybe, that Paul Heyman was fired from his position. Gallows, you listen to them speak, and obviously they do not like Paul Heyman. Gallows called Heyman a fucking liar and a piece of shit. And look, I am sure that Paul Heyman is not blameless in this, and I am sure that Paul Heyman told them things that they wanted to hear. Paul Heyman lying to people is not breaking news. I am not saying that they do not have a reason to be upset with Paul Heyman if they felt that he did not deal with them in good faith. Go ahead, and you want to shit on him, go ahead and shit on him. But Gallows himself admits that Vince McMahon could have interjected and stopped it, and he opted not to. But it's like, it was almost said in this interview here as an afterthought. I think he buried the plot, which is that Vince McMahon could have put his foot down and said no, and he chose not to. Vince McMahon did not want Anderson and Gallows under contract. He thought they were expendable. If he wanted to keep them, he was the one person with the power to do so, and he didn't. Yet they shit all over Paul Heyman, and they give Vince McMahon a pass. That was the funniest takeaway from this entire interview. Paul Heyman wanted the Good Brothers fired, and poor Vince McMahon, his wrinkly hands, they were tied. There was nothing he could do about it. He could not overrule Paul Heyman. I guess Paul Heyman had the autonomy that, Cowboy Bill Watts was told he would have, but never had back in 1995. Vince McMahon must be going soft. If you want to be mad at somebody, be mad at Vince McMahon. Nothing happens in that company without that guy's approval. If he wanted to keep them, then guess what? They would still be working there right now. Anderson says that he thinks when word got around about their contracts, and boy, people, there's a lot of loose lips in that company because it wasn't long after they signed those contracts. Everybody knew what they made, apparently. Guys were coming up to them in the back. Wow, you made... So, how would they even know about this? If they didn't tell anybody, right? The person they negotiated the deal with was Triple H. How does this stuff, behind the scenes, dollar figures and stuff like that get out? There's a lot of loose lips in that company. But what Anderson says is that he thinks when word got around about their contracts, there were a lot of people, including some agents, and they name drop people like Jamie Noble and Michael Hayes, who probably didn't like it. or they didn't think that they were worth it for the spot that they were in, which is certainly a valid argument to make. But they got in Vince's ear, and that they may have convinced Vince McMahon, don't step in here, they have to go. Whatever it was, the story here is it's not that Paul Heyman fired Luke Gallows and Karl Anderson. Vince McMahon fired Luke Gallows and Karl Anderson. There's your headline. And if AJ Styles felt that he couldn't work with Paul Heyman because of that, then how does he justify working for Vince McMahon? But Paul Heyman, well, boy, he's the one that can't be trusted. Triple H begs this guy to sign. Think about your family, think about your kids, and then months later they get fired. I just think it's very funny they didn't use the same language for him that they used to describe Paul Heyman, but I guess we all know why that is, right? You don't want to burn those bridges in case one day you get another big money contract offer. But I just thought that was the funniest part of the entire interview. I had a nice laugh at this idea that Paul Heyman had so much stroke and so much power in this company, Vince McMahon was powerless to do anything about it. Funniest fucking thing I heard all day yesterday. I get why AJ Styles would be upset. AJ Styles, after this happened, he went on his Mixer. And he said he felt like he let his friends down. He felt like he was responsible. I could have done more. There was nothing he could have done. I mean, how could he even know that they were on the bubble? Those two guys had no idea that their jobs were in jeopardy. How would AJ know? The company's not going to consult with AJ before they fire them. How could AJ know? There's nothing he could have done. But it's like Anderson said. When those guys were trying to decide which deal they were going to take, they had some big money offers on the table. Not just from WWE. They had big money offers from Impact, from New Japan, and from AEW, right down to the creative on how they were going to debut. Same with New Japan. New Japan, Rocky Romero, whoever it was, told them how they were going to bring them in. How they were going to bring them back. They were going to attack Jon Moxley, who was the United States champion at the time. They would come in, they would lay out Moxley, and eventually it would build to a U.S. title match at the Tokyo Dome between Moxley and Karl Anderson, with Karl Anderson winning the championship. So they laid out their creative plans in New Japan as well, not just AEW. So they had all these options on the table, and they said AJ was trying to convince them to stay with WWE because AJ stayed with WWE. AJ could have left too. He signed a new deal, and he wanted his friends to sign too. He wanted his friends to stay with him. And so they do, and then 6 or 7 months later, they get the axe. If you're AJ Styles, you got to feel like you played a part in convincing your buddies to stay, and now you have a job, and they don't. So I get why he would feel partially responsible. I don't think that WWE ever wanted these guys. I agree with them when they say that Vince McMahon and Triple H, they didn't know shit about their history with New Japan. They knew they worked in Japan. They even had the announcers mention it on TV sometimes. Former IWGP Tag Team Champ. You think Vince McMahon knew that Anderson and Gallows were IWGP Tag Team Champions? You say IWGP in front of Vince McMahon, he probably looks at you like you got a third eyeball in the middle of your head. Triple H, I doubt Triple H was up on their full history in New Japan as well. Those guys didn't know. They didn't give a shit about their history in New Japan. They didn't care one way or the other. They saw them as a package deal to get AJ because the three of them were this close to signing with Impact. AJ said they even had a meeting at Dixie Carter's house. Dixie Carter's house. I'm sure they were having tea with their little pinky in the air at Dixie Carter's house. That's how close they were to leaving Japan and going to Impact. And then Triple H came calling. Without a doubt in my mind, WWE took these two guys to make sure they got the grand prize. The grand prize was AJ Styles. And once they got him, they pushed Anderson and Gallows for about 3 minutes. And then when they got bored with them, they brushed him off to the side. They pushed the guy they really wanted in the first place, and they forgot about the other two. 6 months later, Karl Anderson had a pumpkin on his head. AJ Styles was the WWE champion, and Karl Anderson had a fucking pumpkin on his head. They fucked up. And I think they know they fucked up. It's not always just about the money. they still could have made great money. But instead of taking great money for more freedom and happiness, they took ridiculous money to go right back to the same situation they were in before. Remember what they said in this very interview. They were having buyer's remorse on choosing WWE 7 months into a 3.5-year deal. They knew 7 months in that they were going to be looking for the exit. They knew they made a terrible mistake. And WWE did nothing to convince them otherwise in 2017 or in 2018. And then comes 2019 and they got blinded by greed. And greed is good, I guess, if that's all that drives you. But then, a week after re-signing, they're already texting Triple H about problems with creative. The exit ramp was right there. All they had to do was turn the car. The GPS was begging them, turn right. And instead they kept going straight. Because they were naive. They were naive to think that things would be any different. And they got played, and they fucked over their friends in the process. That's why they're on Impact now, and not on AEW Dynamite. Fortunately for them, Impact offered them the same terms that they offered them last year when their deals were coming up. They signed a 2-year contract that also allows them, once the borders open back up again, to take dates with New Japan, so long as it does not conflict with any dates from Impact.